topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, hello. Glad you could join us. I'm Bill Martinez, and boy, a lot on the docket and a lot to talk about. We're going to have Steve Bonta, the publisher of the New American Magazine, up in just a moment to talk about the global economic order. Who really holds the power? You know, a lot of dark money flying around, and I think routinely people have said, "Oh, it's George Soros's fault." Well, I think George Soros is just only a piece of the puzzle. There's lots of dark money that's flying around that is doing everything they can to deconstruct the United States of America. And this shouldn't be new. I mean, as soon as America became a nation, what we did was we turned the whole global order on its head. It wasn't about czars. It wasn't about kings. It wasn't about the traditional governmental apparatchik. This was a whole different idea. They took the pyramid, the construct of the, I guess what you would say the traditional work pyramid, where you would have the CEO on top, and then it would go all the way down to the minions. Well, our founding fathers said, no, we're going to let the minions be in charge. This is going to be a government of, for, and by we the people. Well, that was revolutionary. When did that ever happen? Where did that come up? And that really threatened the whole global, even then, the global economic order. And here it is for 250 years almost. There have been attacks on this country to undermine. And here we are at this point, at this dawn of this new era, where you're looking at what's happening in New York, where you've got an admitted democratic socialist. And don't be fooled by the name democratic. Okay, it's socialist. It's socialism, which is, on the road to communism. That's what it's all about. History has pointed that time and time again. So it's just a very euphemistic way to say communism. But forget about like I said, forget about democratic. That's just window dressing. That's not what it's all about. And again, all you have to do is listen to what Mamdani is offering, and it's straight from the playbook, straight from Mein Kampf, the Communist Manifesto. And we have been saying all along, well, all that's fine and well, but when are we the people going to compare it with, I believe, the greatest document that have liberated man and that have created more prosperity than any other form of government in the history of mankind? And that is our U.S. Constitution. How does Mamdani's Constitution square up with our Constitution? Does it add or take away? Well, clearly it takes away. I mean, starting with property. Again, that's the tradition of the socialism and communism, is that you don't own anything. And of course, this was shouted from the rafters by the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who said, you will, by 2030, you will own nothing and you'll like it. I mean, he could have almost said it with a German accent, I think, and sound like, remember Sergeant Schultz, you will like it. But you got to really suspend a lot of tradition and success in order to come to that point. So like all regimes that have done this, they first, make it seem nice because they want to get a segment of the community moving in that direction. And then for anybody else that resists, well, then, we have ways to get you to comport, right? I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, maybe for these new kids who are growing up into this, they may think that it's new, but look, there's enough history, and hopefully they would look into their history books. Or even then, I mean, with all the AI that's around and how efficient they've become in utilizing AI, do some research and find out for themselves, what this all leads to. It leads to shared misery. It leads to anything but what they told you they were going to do. I mean, we've already had government-run grocery stores in Kansas, and it didn't last long. In fact, you saw the shelves. I remember when I saw the shelves, this was before they went out of business, and no wonder the people there in Kansas were complaining about it, because all there was just literally one package of hot dog buns on the shelf. That was it. I mean, that should have told you everything there is to know about government-run grocery stores. But Mamdani, like all other socialists and communists, you just didn't have enough time, didn't have money. Of course, we wouldn't do it that way. It would be different. Well, it's never different. It always ends up in the same place where it becomes bankrupt and inefficient and very painful for those that are served by this type of government. And, on one hand, the Republicans are saying, oh, we ought to champion, we had to champion this and think, oh, this is going to be great because this is going to be pin the tail on the donkey and, use Mamdani as kind of the poster child of the Democratic Party. I mean, the Democratic Party is in a total mess. There's no question. I mean, I feel for those Democrats who are moderate and reasonable, and they're probably wondering, what the heck, where do I go? I don't see myself as a Republican and I myself as a Democrat, but I don't see myself as this Democratic Party. And this is why so many are leaving, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. and on and on. And there's millions of people across the country who have done so. And I'm saying, look let's go back and remember what our first president said when he was talking about party factions, that it would not be positive for our unity. It would be problematic. And I don't know. I mean, maybe this could possibly head to a situation where, we realize that partisanship is not in our best interest. It's argumentative. I mean, if you want to have argument all the time, I guess, hey, have parties, have the red shirts and the green shirts, have this competitive issue going on. But if it's about America and America's people, and we're in it for the common interests of one another, regardless of your perception. And by that, I mean, again, using the Constitution as a litmus test. If we all agree that that is our Constitution, we better, but if we say, hey, this is it, then that's what we look at. Any idea, any policy that comes in, anybody deciding, we're going to open up the borders and just let millions of people come in illegally, does it add or take away from the Constitution? Does providing health care for illegal immigrants, does it add or take away, from the Constitution? Having a level playing field to where commerce can be conducted in a way that is fair and even-handed, does that add or take away from the U.S. Constitution? Does having a system where you can utilize the Treasury and taxpayers' money to buy votes, does it add or take away from the Constitution? Having rigged elections where people are unsure that the voting machines are qualified and that they are operating efficiently, does this add or take away, from the Constitution? Just, go right on down the line here, ladies and gentlemen. And if we ignore the Constitution and think that, especially socialists or somebody else who has no promise, has no, no loyalty to the Constitution. And this is the thing that still beguiles me, is I'm wondering how some of these ideologues who seem to be so dispossessed of the Constitution can take an oath of office. If you can't take an oath of office swearing your allegiance to the Constitution is to serve and protect we the people and our national interests, what is it? Or maybe you just lie to yourself and say, oh, it's okay in the reason of what the Muslims call taqiyya, that it's okay to lie if it meets the end goal. Well, wait a minute. That's a breach of trust. We can't be untrustworthy. I mean, if that's the case, then am I supposed to be driving my car and have a lack of trust that you see a red signal and you're not going to stop at it? I mean, it comes down, it's that basic, right? This is what we're faced with today, ladies and gentlemen. And, again, we've got to get back to those traditions and those issues that are really important. We have Steve Bonta joining us now. And, I want to bring him on. Steve Bonta, as I mentioned, is the publisher of the New American Magazine. Hey, Steve, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Bill, good to be here. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing terrific. We're trying to lay down the foundation of this global economic order and who really holds the power. There's a lot of report about dark money out there. We want to blame George Soros for everything, but it's deeper than that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, in the sense that it goes back quite a few generations, this state of affairs. George Soros is certainly a power player. So is, you mentioned Klaus Schwab earlier on, and others like that who perhaps are not as well known. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the way things are. I wanted to point out, though, that all is not lost. I mean, the elections in Argentina on Sunday were just a resounding rebuke of global power brokers. For the most part, I mean, everyone, myself included, kind of expected that Javier Milei and his freedom movement were going to be set back, that the socialists were poised to make a comeback, and instead they got routed. So so they are beatable. But one of the significant things is that they changed the voting. Back in September, they had votes in Buenos Aires province. There's a map floating around on the Argentine Facebook.
Right.
It shows that all the districts in Buenos Aires province back in September all voted for the Peronists, the socialists. And now 50 days later, 5-0, less than 2 months later, they've changed it so they have to vote with a paper ballot, and they have poll watchers and everything else. They enforce the voting laws, and suddenly, mirabile dictu, they're all voting overwhelmingly for Milei and the pro-freedom movement. So obviously, voter control is something we've talked a lot about here in the United States.
Exactly.
They've taken advantage of obviously the fact that it's all now computerized and people do the early voting. And I mean, that's a major lever of control. That's wielded not just by venal Democrats and local ward healers and that sort of thing. People tend to think it's a local thing, but it's really that's something else that's being pushed by George Soros and his ilk. Is ascendancy over the voting system, because control the votes, you can control who gets into office.
Exactly.
So, anyway, so that was a little piece of good news I wanted to make sure you didn't pass up on, because
no, thank you for bringing that up. No, not at all. And that's a bright sign, and something that here in the United States we should draw encouragement from. I mean, we've done a lot of research on this, going back to Jimmy Carter and the mail-in ballots, all this stuff that's going on, what we've experienced in 2020. I mean, still Rasmussen, their polling indicates that a majority of Americans do not have trust in the system as it stands right now, Steve.
Yes, but of course, we're all paranoid. We're all delusional. There's no evidence that anything, untoward happened in 2020 and so forth. I mean, the narrative is unbelievably persistent, and nobody listens. I mean, most people reject it out of hand. And we saw that, there's literally no way that Biden got, 81 million people to vote for him in 2020. But they were able to take advantage of this unique convergence of circumstances, paranoia over COVID and all of the sudden and oftentimes illicit changes to the electoral laws, like what happened in Pennsylvania was done extra constitutionally. They changed the laws so people could use these drop boxes and all this. And the socialists are nothing if not clever and resourceful. When they see an opportunity to seize power or to preserve power, they take it.
Yeah, exactly.
They did. And I think that, frankly, I think that Dinesh D'Souza's, documentary film showed how they did it pretty convincingly.
Exactly. Well, I think in part, I think there's lots of evidence out there, and there's been some smart people, Dinesh D'Souza, just one of many that have demonstrated time and again how this could have happened, but the courts are not interested in taking this topic up. Our Congress is not interested in doing it, because it served the interests of the Democratic Party. They got the results they wanted. The challenge for them going forward is, can they continue to pull this ruse over the eyes of the electorate.
No, and of course, the argument that they used again and again to avoid the question, because no one wanted to deal with it back in 2020, 2021, you have no standing, therefore we're going to dismiss it. Okay, well, then who does have standing? I mean, that begs the question. So are you saying, in effect, that there exists a class of crimes, namely electoral manipulation, where nobody really has standing to do anything about it? Unless you can prove, well, they stole my dead mother's name and they used it, that kind of those sorts of trivial things. Maybe they'll allow prosecution, but systematic corruption. Apparently, nobody has standing, so the courts won't do anything about it. And this becomes very difficult in practice. So I think the salutary lesson is that in spite of the undoubted power and entrenchment of the globalists, it is possible. I mean, if Argentina can fight back, we sure as heck can here in the United States.
Why not?
However, we're going to have to get our electoral house in order between now and next November's, November of next year's elections, because if the broad capacity to cheat in critical swing states and even in non-swing states continues to exist, cheat they will. Yeah, and they'll probably get the results that they want because it's a midterm election. But Argentina's elections were midterm elections too, and people thought, oh well, no one's going to turn out. And then Argentina, and Milei went out. He's a very clever guy. He went out and with a slogan, he went this, La libertad avanza o Argentina retrocede, which means liberty will advance or Argentina will go backwards. Exactly. And Libertad Avanza is the name of his party, and that really resonated with the Gen Z types in Argentina, and So voting can be a powerful tool, a powerful check against these people, including, all the propaganda, all the AI, all the their ascendancy over finance and everything we've talked about before in your show, the fiat money, everything else that they do, in theory, can be put to naught if the voice of the people is loud enough, if people, can do it. But, to do that, you have to make sure that that the bad guys can't cheat. And that's going to be a tall order.
And the thing is, Steve, I mean, look at where America is now compared to where we were a year ago. I mean, there's a huge contrast here. And yes, the media is continuing on beating their drum, doing everything they can to malign this president, whether it's a ballroom or, name it. I mean, they just cannot help themselves. They're just so enraged over everything that is Donald Trump. And everything that is Donald Trump, for the most part, is benefiting the American people.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, on a daily basis, I go through the Google News aggregator, and you could just go down and look at every Trump story, and every single one, with the exception of the occasional Fox News story, with the exception of that, every single one is negative. Yeah. Every headline, it's always Trump did this, but. Yeah. And there's always a but, right. But he also, I forget what they were traducing his speech in Malaysia the other day or yesterday, and everything else, Trump met with, the Prime Minister Ibrahim of Malaysia, but he made a fool of himself. And he talked to, the King of Thailand, the Prime Minister of Cambodia, but, he was clearly making it all about himself. They can never give him credit for anything, domestic or foreign. It's remarkable. I've never seen, but people I think are just tuning it out at this point. And the fact is, most people don't get their news from, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg, and so forth. They get it from people like you.
Right. Well, Steve, thank you. And also the New American, because we're both committed to pursuing the truth, no matter where it leads. And the thing is that the people need to stay engaged. They may disengage from the mainstream media, that good on them, but you need to still stay engaged, because this is a government of, for, and by we the people. Otherwise, it becomes a government of, for, and by the elites. And this is how we got to this, this great $38 trillion in debt situation that we're living under right now, right?
Yeah. But I think there are cautious grounds for optimism, and it may be a generational thing, Bill, because what we have now is it's a Gen Z phenomenon. So the Gen Z is kind of like the first generation that's grown up where their entire world is defined by unfettered access to information via the internet. And and we've seen a spate of things already. The Argentine elections are the latest. It was the Gen Zers that supported Milei, that came out, that voted for him. He calls him his leones, his lions of liberty, and they go out. But a few months ago, it was in Kathmandu in Nepal, where the Gen Zers responded to an attempt by the communist government there, by their longtime communist dictator, to shut down the internet, a la China.
Right.
And they said, no, we're not doing this. And they turned out and had this joyous protest, and like 80 of them got shot down and killed, but they persisted anyway. And finally, the guy fled the country. And Nepal still has problems, but at least it isn't run by a communist dictator anymore. Right. So one sees this kind of thing, and they're elsewhere in the world. They're just stirrings of discontent where more and more. I mean, Gen Z, regardless of what ethnicity or language they speak, they're all aware of the fact that all around the world, people are supposed to have unfettered access to the internet, and where that falls short, So I think that really is leading to just a generational change, what we're seeing. And I think a lot of people, certainly the legacy media, fail to understand that the old days of the Dan Rathers and people like this telling us what to think,
right,
defining the Overton window, and we all more or less fall in line, except for a few outliers who think for themselves, but we don't care about them because they never elect anyone anyway. Now everybody thinks like your kooky uncle who lives in a out in the mountains or something like that. Everybody has that that mindset now, and it's great because it's similar to the mindset of the people who set up the United States. I mean, there's a wonderful book published by what was his name, Bernard Bailyn. He was a historian at Harvard University, and it was called The Ideological Origins of American Founders. I read it years ago, and it was a very frank account of the American founders. And we tend to think of them all these staid, intellectual, really smart guys, like
with their powdered wigs. Yeah.
They were all conspiracy theorists.
Yes,
all of them. According to Bailyn, he says one thing you find when you look at the founding era, they were all seeing conspiracies everywhere and sinister plots, and they were just reflexively cynical and skeptical about everything they were told by the crown, by the government. And so, I think we kind of come back to that. Yeah. And it's probably the internet we have to thank for that people now are just reflexively skeptical again and saying, no, don't talk to me about the COVID vaccines. Right. I don't want to hear about the 2020 elections. I don't want to hear about the J6ers because it's all BS what they're telling me, right. and this seems to be, again, it's not a fringe thing anymore. It's, it's everybody. And the mainstream media, we've got to get things back to the way they were when I was young, and people believe, people's way of thinking was respectable, they respected their betters and all this. Well, that's gone.
Yeah. Well, the betters broke trust with the Zers, and that's really, and yes, I mean, you look at what happened with COVID. You look at what happened, with the 2020 election, the J6ers. I mean, we're still trying to figure out who the heck killed JFK, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I find it reassuring because in my generation, I'm almost 62 years old. I was always kind of one of those guys that people would edge away from, and I start talking about how the Federal Reserve, oh, that's right. Steve. He's the crazy uncle, Right. Now everybody's like that. And I sort of, part of me wishes I were 40 years younger because I would probably fit in a lot better with the Gen Zers than I do with my own staid and my own generation. I don't know.
But I think our generation,
optimistic. I really am.
Well, I am too. And I think our generation still needs to come alongside the Zers to help them to where they don't waste energy.
Yes.
And this is what our experience, what we can bring to the table here and complement this effort to where we maximize this to the point that we, the end game is what we all want. And that's a better America for all Americans, right?
And without violence. I mean, that's the key. And the amazing thing is that for all of the, the doomsaying, oh, we're headed towards a civil war and so forth. I mean, there is conflict and there may be some more to come. I mean, the left is not going to give up its grip on power. But by and large, I mean, I'm surprised that we've made so much progress in the right direction with comparatively little violence.
Yeah.
We may yet get through this thing without the country tearing itself apart. And that's that I find very encouraging.
Well,
but people have to stand fast. They have to,
But you're right. I mean, the violence is still here. I mean, let's not delude ourselves. I mean, we used to always think, particularly with, violence targeted toward people of faith, I mean, we used to always
Oh,
say, "Oh, well, the Christian persecution is happening overseas," and you know, you read about it, you know, in all kinds of different publications, Voice of the Martyrs, and on, but not here in America. But look what's happened in this year. I mean, we have a lot of shootings of Christian churches and synagogues, and this is, I say a lot. I mean, more than we're used to,
yeah.
and you know, this is something that we need to be mindful of, because, and I've been very sensitive about the rhetoric and the language that's coming out, especially from our elected officials. These are the leaders of the country talking about people being Nazis and, you know, and Hitler and things like this. This all conditions the ground and the environment to do some crazy stuff. I mean, you know, the murdering of Charlie Kirk. Give me a break. And I say that, I don't say that flippantly. I say it that because of this language, and especially after it, the language just, it was almost like, okay, we paused for a minute. He was assassinated. You know, maybe we saw his funeral on TV, and then it was like, oh, just can't wait to get back to business as usual.
Yeah. Well, but here's the good thing. And, you know, if Charlie, wherever Charlie is now, I think he probably sees it this way. You know, that event was a terrible thing, but it sure galvanized people, didn't it?
Oh, it did.
Caused
Yes.
a lot of people, because, you know, the problem is that people on the right, who are on the right, big R and little r, tend to want to be nice to everybody. They tend to want to do the Christian thing, right?
Right.
I mean, because that's just, not all of us are Christians necessarily, but I'd say the overwhelming majority are in some sense, you know, and we believe in turning the other cheek and loving your enemies and all this type of thing. And that it's difficult to maintain that attitude and also be militant in the sense of saying, but I'm not going to give on certain things.
Right.
Some things I'm just not going to give any ground on. I mean, I think, and again, if you look at the founding era as the example, you see this same mentality. The founders did not want war with the British.
Right.
Even after Lexington and Concord and the siege of Boston, there was still, you know, they kind of hoped there was a way out of it, but ultimately, obviously, it didn't go in that direction. But they had certain red lines, as we would say. I mean, they loved the English. Most of them were they were all Anglophiles. They didn't want to fight with the mother country. They realized the debt that they owed to England with the common law and, you know, John Locke and all the rest of this stuff. You know, it's not like it, but there were certain things that they weren't going to allow the English to do, and one was to disarm them.
Right.
For example, and that was a line they were not willing to cross. And obviously, beyond a certain point, they weren't willing to accept taxation without representation either. And that you know, so and one could go on. So you know, it's very clear. People like Benjamin Franklin were very much, and Nathaniel Greene. You know, they were late comers to the war. They didn't want, you know, they were not men of violence. Some of them, maybe like Samuel Adams, had a different take on it. You know,
right? Exactly.
They were itching for a fight. You know, but you know, by and large, you know, the view, you know, they kind of knew what that would mean. So, I mean, I think we hew to that example of being resolute. You know, there's certain lines that we're not going to cross, like allow ourselves to be completely disarmed and all this sort of thing. But right now, you know, where the question of the Second Amendment is concerned, we're moving in the right direction, aren't we? I mean, we're seeing over the course of the last 20 years, you know, state after state after state adopting constitutional carry. I think Florida was the latest just recently. And, you know, it's happening, and it's happening without people having to take up arms and do all this sort of thing. So it's very encouraging.
Right.
We seem to be you know, bit by bit, election by election, you know, and so the death of Charlie Kirk, the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, was, I mean, in some sense, a terrible event, but it's being turned into a positive thing, I think, because people are realizing, okay, you know, we can still love our enemies without being squishy and nice, you know.
Right.
We
Exactly.
be more resolute.
Well, and I think we're realizing in the process that, you know, freedom isn't free.
Yeah.
And the other thing in terms of my Christian brothers and sisters is, as the word of God says, there's a time for war and a time for peace. And my takeaway of that verse is that you better know the difference. Because if you don't know the difference, you could be overwhelmed. And it's hard. You're exactly right. I mean, Christians want to turn the other cheek. We're peace loving because we reflect and have a moral value and consideration for life that is unique,
Well,
to our faith, I would
and you
say.
have to remember, war doesn't necessarily mean shooting war. I
Right.
mean, the world has been in a state of war since the fall of Adam and Eve.
Yes. Amen.
War
You're
versus
right.
good and evil. It's an eternal conflict in some ways.
Right.
It started in the heavens, right?
Right.
And so there's a continuation of that, and it's largely fought in the arena of ideas and words.
Mhm.
But even there, you can choose to be resolute and an unapologetic defender of liberty, or you can be squishy.
Yes. Right.
Oh, let's all just get along, and so that's the thing. And
Mhm.
the beauty of it is no blood need necessarily be shed.
Right.
And I mean, Charlie Kirk never shed anyone's blood, and
No.
yet he did have a tremendous impact just because he was bold.
Right.
And
Right. Exactly. Well, and you talk about the power of the First Amendment, and you and I talked about this before. I think the single figure that really opened up the gates for us to be able to kind of calm things down and allow for free speech was one Elon Musk in the purchase of Twitter.
that helped.
I mean, it was huge what he did, for America. And I'm so grateful, and I will always be grateful for what he did in restoring and bringing us back to our founding. But, you talk about our founding fathers and how they were struggling with this new concept. And I don't imagine that initially they galvanized around freedom. I think freedom was a byproduct of this whole process. And they realized that the ultimate calling that we could have was to be free. And that really galvanized, I believe, and, brought, people together to where they realized, okay, we love the mother country. We really don't want to do this, but for the sake of freedom.
Well, and we have over several generations sort of unlearned that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
It's the economy stupid.
Yeah.
It's security stupid, whatever it happens to be. And, people have a right to expect that their government provide a modicum of security and economic stability, to be sure. But freedom is a rallying cry unlike any other.
Exactly.
And I watched Javier Milei, the Argentine president's speech to his supporters last night. The results of the election were, I think, far exceeded even Milei's expectations, and he tends to be pretty optimistic. But one of the things he said was, "We are now going to make Argentina the freest country in the world." He said, because that's what our strength is in freedom. And he went on in that vein to the rapturous applause of the people in the room. And that's really what it's about. People do rally around the standard of liberty.
Well, and what he's realized, and of course their country not that long ago was oppressed. They were so far away from freedom. And now they're beginning to realize this, and they're unleashing this natural resource within the embodiment of the people there in their home country. And America should look at that as an example to say, look at with the history, the rich tradition and everything that we have. See, if we could have, I know we talk in terms of a revival in a religious sense all the time, but if we could have a revival in terms of, our founding and our values that we enjoyed some 250 years ago, and unleashed the GDP of 350 million Americans, woo, man, there'd be a lot of fun that we'd have.
Oh yeah. I mean, nothing going to stop us now if that happens. I mean, the problem is, though, we still have to sort out a few things. Mm-hmm. So I mean, freedom got a black eye back in the during the sexual revolution and the drugs and stuff of the 60s and 70s, because the people who prosecuted that particular campaign, so to speak, the culture war, did it under the banner of freedom. They, the Woodstock Festival.
That's right.
Woodcock's a bird, but the Woodstock Festival was carried out under the banner of, greater freedom and, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's all about freedom. All you need is freedom. Well, that's a type of freedom, but that's what we would call license. And so, of course, sensible people looked at it and said, well, no, that's not really what they want, what we want. And so then they said, well, we need to crack down and have all these, the government should make a law, and so the drug war began and all these other things. And so, people on the right sort of distance themselves from this ideal of freedom because freedom is what those hippies want, all those drug people. We don't want that. We want law and order. Of course, that's very easily turned into something, that's kind of the way the Nazis did too. They're all about law and order, and so you have to be careful. And before long, we had just these Byzantine drug laws and everything else. And then, of course, with 9/11, all the surveillance state that was brought was all done under the, law and order becomes paramount. Right. And freedom somehow gets lost. And people like Ron Paul for a long time were these lone voices in the wilderness. Oh, you sound kind of like a hippie talking about freedom. Only hippies and weirdos and beatniks think about that, And so, but now we've come, again, we've kind of come full circle where people are realizing, you do need to have law and order within boundaries, but we've taken it way too far. Mm-hmm. And now everybody is surveilled and tracked and controlled and everything else. And we don't want that. And so freedom has become, real freedom in the sense the founders understood, I think, is once again in vogue. The problem is still a lot of these Gen Z people are very young, very green. The doctrine of freedom is something that kind of distills gradually on your soul, like the dews from heaven. You have to spend years and years studying it, thinking about it, practicing it in your life, learning what it is to be an agent unto yourself, a free human being. It's not something that can be learned, the couple of catchphrases. I mean, that can start you in the right direction. So, to the extent that people in our generation have that experience, I think it needs to be shared with all these enthusiastic and energetic younger souls.
Well, to balance it out, like you said, these tensions, these dynamic tensions have to be measured in such a way and balanced in such a way that it doesn't abandon and lose its purpose. And the challenge that we've had traditionally is just like you said, something seems to be going awry and we look to the government to fix it. Oh, Lord,
specifically the federal government.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Constitutionally.
Right. Yeah. And so that's the wrong spot. I mean, this has to be measured at a local level, individually, one soul at a time. And as we do that, then hopefully we bring people together in such a way that are focused on the same objective, to where we can reinforce and help manage that dynamic tension between freedom and irresponsibility.
Well, a lot of that manages itself in a system where federalism is respected, right? Right. Because, I mean, if you look at alcohol, which is a problem, what do you do about alcohol? Well, at one point we tried a federal level, one size fits all, and that didn't work. Although they did it the right way, they amended the Constitution, and the Volstead Act and all that sort of thing, and then they amended it again to get rid of it. But it turned out this wasn't a good idea. And so now, for the most part, local governments and state governments experiment and try to figure out what works best. It's not an easy question, because if I drink and get drunk, it may be a private thing, but then if I get behind the wheel of a car or I get into a violent fight or I start, in a drunken rage, abuse my wife or my children or something, then it's not a personal thing anymore. So it's a difficult thing. And so federalism allows experimentation, right? And the same would be true of drugs, except long ago we decided, well, let's let the federal government do that. Let them pass all the laws, and you could go through area after area. Education is another good example. Maybe it's true that communities have a vested, interest in ensuring a certain level of education. We don't want to have an illiterate population for sure. But what does that look like? Well, traditionally, it was done via local schools and local schoolhouses and all that sort of thing. Now it's all done by the federal government, the Department of Education.
And how's that working for us?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, federalism, and that's the missing ingredient. And interesting, Argentina is also a federal republic, like the United States. But federalism is, I think, is the often neglected key to the maintenance of this balance that you're talking about, of liberty. Because then, if you live in a state and you find, the laws here are just too oppressive, I don't like them, well, you can move to another state.
Right.
And people do that all the time. They vote with their feet. And but when you do everything at the federal level, it doesn't work that way. It's one size fits all.
Well, Steve, and as you say, and I think right now where we are, we need to answer these difficult questions. Otherwise, the tendency is going to be, okay, well, the federal government didn't work, so maybe we need to look outside and look to the United Nations or some type of global control, which is what you wrote about in terms of protecting free speech. I mean, you got situations now, like for example, in England, if you say the wrong thing, you're subject to arrest. I mean, some of the conversation you and I had, I mean, we're okay here in America so far, but in England, they might say, well, oh yeah, Steve Bonta was with Bill Martinez. They had this conversation and we're going to arrest him at the airport, right?
Yeah. And it has happened. Although it's mostly English, citizens that get, they get that when they, return home from saying something in an interview in another country and that kind of thing. But yeah, it could in theory happen. Yeah. And obviously, now maybe it may not be obvious, but the European Union, in particular the EU, is trying to force its version of non-free speech on the rest of us, on our internet companies, for example, forcing them to comply with their laws. And if you don't, we're gonna fine you and all the rest of this. So it's a very vexed topic indeed. And I got to say, it's not by accident that a lot of this is happening. A lot of the interesting stuff is not happening in Europe. I mean, there are some places, Italy and so forth. They're having a nationalist revival in Europe. It's less clear to me, outside of maybe Poland, perhaps, that nationalist revival in, say, in Italy with Giorgia Meloni or something like that is actually translating into more freedom for Italians, or whether they're still acquiescing to the European Union in most of these things in terms of cracking down on speech and controlling the finances, all the rest of this stuff. So, but on the other hand, there's a lot of exciting things happening in Latin America, not just Argentina, and here in the United States, and to a lesser extent in parts of Asia. You can see, people are fed up with being controlled.
Do you think the Trump factor is playing into some of this?
Absolutely, but Trump. Again, Trump is mostly attractive because he is unapologetically pro-American. Given where we're coming from, the Biden years, that in itself seems refreshing. A lot more encouraging is the fact that he talks a lot about getting rid of the income tax and winding up the Federal Reserve and all this sort of thing, stopping taxes on Social Security. But so far, it's all been talk. Now, he's only been in office about 10 months at this point, so we'll give him a little latitude. But
look what he's done in 10 months.
Well, yeah, but a lot of what he's done has been, basically getting our foreign policy on a saner or more rational basis, our immigration policy, and this sort of thing. I guess, probably free speech we're better off than we were. Certainly, that the cancel culture and the DEI stuff has mostly faded into the woodwork. Although it'll come right back if Trump is out of office and is replaced by Gavin Newsom in 2028 or something like that. I would think we should also point out, under the Constitution, it's really Congress that is most responsible for this. It shouldn't be this mighty presidential colossus making all the changes. Most of it should come through Congress with the complaisance of the president. And so when you'll know that the republic is back in full flower when this stuff is coming from Congress. Good example of the tariffs. I greatly fear that the Supreme Court decision may go against Trump where the tariffs are concerned, because it's pretty plain to me he has no authority, no legitimate constitutional authority to levy tariffs. Problem is, Congress refuses to do it. So he's kind of doing the right thing, but in the wrong way, so to speak. And this is the case in a lot of things. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily wrong what he's doing. We talked about this the last time we talked, with regard to, sending the National Guard and so forth to cities. But you don't want to see that happen too often. You would hope that the local governments and local constabularies will be adequate to the task and won't sit on their hands the next time some favored interest group decides to go out and riot in the streets and willfully assault people and smash cars and, attack policemen and so forth. You would think.
Right.
So, the Republic's in full flower, and most of this is coming from the state and local level. The president's mostly a dude who signs bills and occasionally gives an inspiring speech.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. But Trump is concerned about the lives of Americans,
Absolutely.
whether it's in Portland, Chicago, these hot spots in DC. I mean, DC of all places. And it was like the mayors and everybody was just, oh, it's just another body count. I mean, it was almost like we're back in the era of Vietnam, where we just got worn out watching, the casualty counts every night on television. It was like, okay, it's Chicago, another weekend. You got X amount of shootings, and yeah, maybe 5, 7, 8 people die. Okay, we'll wait until the next weekend. And it's just been going on that way. It's like a sick mantra. And then Trump, comes up and says, this is unacceptable. So he's putting the heat on these lawmakers to step up. And the people, we the people, need to take note of these lawmakers that aren't stepping up and not fulfilling their duty to the American people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, the day that Trump stands up and gives a State of the Union address or a victory speech after an election or something that says, like, we're going to make America the freest country on earth, that, I will definitely sit up and take notice when he says that.
Right.
So, I mean, because that's the key. And I think we're freer now than we were a year ago. No doubt about that. And certainly freer now than we were during the COVID despotism. But we have a long way to go. We still groan under the yoke of essentially a progressive income tax and an inflationary monetary system that would give the founders nightmares. Mm-hmm. And that's just for starters. I mean, the reason I was a little late getting back is I took my wife, who's a recent immigrant to the United States, to the bank today. Mm-hmm. She has a green card now, or social security card. Took her to a local bank to open a bank account so that she can now have a place to. And you know what? They wouldn't let us do it. And why is that? Because federal regulations said you have to have at least 2 things that prove your current address. Okay, so passport won't suffice. You have to have an envelope with some kind of a bill, like the heating bill, that shows your name on it. And I was afraid this would be the case. I brought along stuff that had my address on it, And the guy was very apologetic when he first said, "Oh, this is fine, we'll be," but then he actually entered it in the computer, and the computer kicked it back and said, "Nope, you can't do this."
Because her name wasn't on the bill as well?
No, because she's only been in the United States.
No, I know that.
The thing is, post 9/11, that's the first thing they did after 9/11. They changed all the banking laws, making it much, much harder for anyone to just open a bank account without proving 6 ways to Sunday, not only that you are who you say you are, which a passport would presumably suffice, but passports don't have your address on them. So then you have to have all these proofs of address and all this stuff. Couldn't do it. So, we wasted over an hour doing that. And, I guess we'll have another go at it in a couple months, when she gets a couple things in the mail that have her name on it, and we can actually, if they're admissible. But this is a major problem with the world we live in today. I mean, the memory of 9/11 has receded, and we're now asserting control over our borders and kicking out the illegal immigrants. But all of those controls, all the new identification stuff persists. I mean, they recently removed the requirement that you take off your shoes.
Yes, exactly.
Although some airports still do. Like when I was at West Palm Beach International Airport last weekend, they still I think they require. No, maybe they didn't. But it was. But there were some other things. So at their discretion, they still do that. But it's still a far cry from what it was pre 9/11.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, Steve, 2 minutes left here. Let's talk government shutdown here in these last 2 minutes.
Right. Yes.
Just for fun.
Is it still shut down, Bill? I haven't really noticed.
Well, for the people that are expecting checks, I feel for them, because this has got to be really hard on them. Air traffic controllers. And the longer this goes, I mean, of course, Schumer says this is good for the Democratic Party, that the people are in pain. I can't even believe he made such a stupid statement.
Well, the cynical part of me, says, yeah, just keep giving us the sound bites, Chuck. You and your comrades. I mean, the only person I never thought I'd say something like this a year ago, but the only person in that party who seems to have a modicum of common sense is Fetterman.
Yes, exactly.
Which is why he's now being said, well, maybe he should be the presidential candidate for the Democrats in 2028. He's also very quirky and so forth. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really noticed the shutdown, except for the fact that it took my wife's social security card like 2 or 3 weeks longer than they said it would to get to, because they shut down the government after we did the initial, filled out the form, but before it actually arrived. So it was delayed, but no biggie. As far as air traffic control, I mean, everything was normal last weekend, the last time I flew, but we'll see. I mean, it's an inconvenience. And if it goes on long enough, I think the Republicans do have some kind of nuclear option,
Right.
where they don't want to do it at this point, but they do have a majority in both houses.
Mhm.
So,
Well, I think that the people are calling for action, Steve. Nuclear or no nuclear, they want this government opened up again. And I believe if the Republicans do that, they exercise the nuclear option, they'll be rewarded for that.
well, yeah, I mean, in particular, I mean, we can't go for long without a functioning military. I mean, we just had 2 separate aircraft in the space of like 2 hours crash in the sea they both originated from the carrier Nimitz. I don't know if you saw that. It's in the South China Sea right now. And they had a helicopter go down, and then the F-18 went down very shortly thereafter. And they think they got some bad fuel or something like this. And one has to wonder if that's something related to the fact that they're shorthanded.
Yeah.
Somewhere along this, I don't know anything about it, but it sort of makes you wonder. And obviously, given the array of formidable enemies that we now face, we can't afford to have the military shut down.
You think?
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of nice to see the unconstitutional portions of the government shut down. To them, I say, get rid of them permanently.
Exactly. I'm with you on that. I mean, all the Doge had pointed out and that could have happened is now available to Donald Trump, and we'll see if he takes that step. He's the publisher of the New American Magazine. Steve Bonta has been our guest. Steve, where can they go to subscribe?
thenewamerican.com, and there's a big old subscribe button right at the top of the page. And you can
easy peasy.
Yep, you can subscribe. Encourage you to do that for our great. You can see a couple of our recent issues there, but we also have day-to-day online content on our website.
Well, Steve Bonta, cannot thank you enough. Appreciate you coming on the show. Take care. Be well, my friend.
Thanks, Bill. Take care.
Well, and our thanks to you for sharing a part of your day with us. For more information, you can go to BillMartinezLive.com. May God bless you and keep you. May make his face shine upon you. May be gracious unto you and give you peace. God bless you. Thank you.